There we go. All right, welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior, an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am so excited to be sharing today's guest with you. I have got Alden Mills with us. Alden, welcome. I am so happy
Great to
that
be
you're
here.
here.
Thank
Yes.
you, Heather. I
So
love your
happy.
show, so it's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. I so appreciate it. So, who is Alden? Alden is a former Olympic Festival rower, a three-time Navy SEAL platoon commander, and was the founder and CEO of Perfect Fitness, one of the fastest growing companies in America. He grew it from 0 to 63 million in sales, becoming the fastest growing consumer company in America per Inc. magazine in 2009. He's the author of Unstoppable Teams, The Four Essential Actions of High Performance Leadership, and Be Unstoppable, The 8 Essential Actions to Succeed at Anything. Alden is a longtime entrepreneur with more than 40 patents and more than 25 years of experience working with high-performing teams. He lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. Alden Mills, welcome to my show. How are you?
Great. I'm
Good.
just hoping that I see some kids bust through the door here, because I can tell you right now, I might have 4 kids come running through at some point. So we should warn the listeners in advance.
That's right. It could happen at any time. And sometimes so my 2-year-old, she'll regularly come in and climb on this chair behind me. It's my big cozy office chair. But sometimes she climbs on the lap and refuses to get off, and Daddy has to come down and retrieve her. So there's a lot of texting that goes on in this house right now between various rooms.
The joys of blended work from home. I get it.
That's right. So, Alden, I'm so excited to have you here and talk a bit about your story. I don't know where you want to start, but you've got some really good, juicy stuff that we could dig into.
Well, as we were talking and preparing for this conversation together, and in the theme of your overall show about the guts and
Hmm.
about what it really takes. And I think the thing that I really want everybody to understand is there isn't some like special gut gene out there that, oh, you're born with it, and you just have it because you're a Navy SEAL. Like I was a kid that was diagnosed with asthma at the age of 12, that was told to play the game of chess, lead a less active lifestyle. And it was my mom that would dig her fingernails into my forearm like a velociraptor claws, and would just say to me, you listen to me. Nobody defines what you can or can't do but you. Now, of course, I didn't get it that day or the next day, but you say it enough times, especially at the ripe old age of 12, you start to get the message. And, I can still hear her. So what if you scored on your own team in basketball? Go try another sport, right? And I was terrible at ball sports, but the guts that came from was actually because I had a mom who believed in me more than I did at that time. And there are those moments in time where the real guts come from a consistency of just getting back up and trying again in a different way. And it isn't that, there's very few of these kind of Braveheart gladiator kind of moments where it's this glorified moment on the battlefield. It's all these small moments of, you know what? I know my alarm clock is telling me to get up. I'm just going to get up, and I'm not going to hit the snooze button. I'm going to get back after it, and I'm going to see if I can learn from somebody new today. Like, those are the real guts. The guts where you just get up and don't you dare give up.
Mm, gosh, I love that so much. Your point about guts being something that you get to choose and that you get to continue to practice versus it just being, a born trait. I think is huge for people to understand, because I think that you're right. Some people think like, oh, he just came that way, or she just came that way, or being courageous comes naturally to somebody and it doesn't come naturally to me. And I think like any of our traits, we get to lean into things one direction or not. I mean, I think back on my own childhood, and I was terribly shy. I went through this period, in like middle school where I couldn't look at people in the eye. I'd walk around and have this heavy backpack on and be looking down, and I got just teased mercilessly by my brother, who was older than me, right? But my dad gave me a book to read. And for anybody listening, like still to this day, it's a book that changed my life, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I read it as like a 7th or 8th grader, and I decided like my discomfort does not take priority over other people. And I think I see like having courage and guts in a bit of the same light. Like we have an opportunity to decide whether our discomfort takes priority or whether we're going to make a choice that's more consistent with who we want to be in the world.
Yeah, first of all, totally agree. Powerful book, by the way. And that was a transformational moment for you, as it was for me, to realize like, hey, wait a minute, I actually have a whole bunch of things that I'm in control of. I'm in control of my discomfort. I'm in control of what I decide I can or can't do. And your name of grit and guts, they're swim buddies. They go hand in hand. Swim buddy is a Navy SEAL term, by the way, for the smallest team, right? You never do anything without your swim buddy.
Right.
But it takes guts to get up every day and keep going, right? To keep going is grit. It's
right.
Like, all right, we're just, we're going to grind this if we have to, but we'll figure out other ways to do it. And when I talk about those components, to me, those are everything in defining. And when people have to just appreciate, it is up to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to them what they decide they want to focus on. It's up to them what direction they end up doing. There's so many little decisions that we take every single day that we start to just forget about because we get comfortable in this comfort zone of mediocrity. And we have to, especially like these times where we're isolated and we're quarantined and there's all kinds of uncertainty. These are the times that we get to challenge ourselves. These are the times that we get to go learn something. These are the times, under the most uncertain times, that there is also equal amounts of opportunity. It just takes a different filter to find it.
I love that. Well, and I mean, clearly your mother, kudos to your mom for helping to shape that filter early for you, right? What would you say to people who maybe didn't have the benefit of receiving some of that through parenting or in their early portion of their journey?
Find a mentor. Your father found you a mentor in how to win friends and influence people. And there are all kinds of mentors out there, and a mentor can just be a book. It can be a podcast. It can be an Instagram feed. But find something that you're like, you know what? That resonates with me. That's something that I can relate with. The one thing that I don't want you to do that so many people will just throw their hands up is like, oh, I didn't have a mom like that. I'm just stuck the way I am. I'm going to be miserably unhappy. I'm like, no. That's a decision you're making, and that doesn't cut it. If it can for you, but I can tell you right now, you're going to be setting sail on a really miserable path.
Yes.
And who knows how long this journey is for each of us. So let's make the most of it.
That's right.
Let's do it.
That's right. Well, and I loved your distinction because I totally agree with talking about guts and grit being swim buddies, right? I may not have used the term swim buddy, but they absolutely go together. And the way that I see it is guts is the activation energy required to make a hard choice or to make a decision, right? And be moving in the right direction. And grit is what it takes to stay moving in that direction, to stay committed to that path.
Yeah. Some people may also refer to guts as, well, guts, that's courage, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you can't have courage without fear. Mm-hmm. And so for everybody who's listening, like, well, I'm scared. Let me tell you how many times I've been scared. Actually, if I'm not scared, I'm usually going, I'm probably not pushing myself hard enough, right? You got to start finding that filter because, doing the unknown is scary. It's supposed to be scary. It's normal to be scared, right? What's actually not normal is to seek it. And the more you can start thinking about seeking it and just creating a little habit of, oh, I'm a little uncomfortable today. I'm a little nervous about going on this show with Heather. What's she going to ask me? And oh, it's a great theme. And oh, I don't want to mess it up. Like, that's a normal thing to
Totally.
have that conversation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I am pretty scary, so I'm glad you decided to join me after all. um, Awesome. And I love that the part about doing the unknown is supposed to be scary. Let's dig into some of your past and talk to us about times where you took a leap into the unknown and what that was like. Share some of your personal story.
Hmm. Okay. I'll give you, I'll tell you my one that was really scary for me. It was showing up at SEAL team training, and there's 122 of us, and we've been in this kind of pre-phase training area for about 7 weeks, and then they all gather us together. And this character comes out talking in a deep southern accent, and he says, "You all want to know the secret of making it through Navy SEAL training?" We're like, 122 of us, like kids to a campfire, right? Just
Yeah.
warm in on them. Like, he goes, "It ain't complicated. It's hard, but it ain't complicated. You see, you just have to decide how much you're willing to pay." Now,
Mm.
here's the rub. You see, I know for a fact 80% of you ain't going to be willing to pay the price. You know why? Because y'all want to be a SEAL on a sunny day. And that's a problem because your country, she don't need SEALs on sunny days. She needs them on scary days. It's cold and it's dark and it's wet and that crack over your head. That ain't thunder. That's somebody wanting you dead. How bad you want to be a SEAL on that day? He goes on for a while, talks about treating us like a hunk of metal and a samurai sword and everything. But that was the first time that we were talked to going, hey, by the way, you could die doing this job. You really want to do this? You really sure you want to do this? Because I think you're all thinking about what it's like on a sunny day. And I bring that story up because that one just keeps resonating with me on every single thing I ventured forth to do. Because you have a tendency to think about things on the sunny day, right? Who doesn't want to be an entrepreneur when you're on the cover of some magazine? Or who doesn't want to be an entrepreneur when your sales are going off the charts, right? Who wants to be an entrepreneur the day the bank decides they want to call your loan and you co-sign with your home and your wife's pregnant with number 3 at the time? How many people want to sign up for that one? How many people want to sign up for somebody sending back 50,000 units because the world's gone to hell in a handbasket during the Depression? Not too many people, right? Who wants to lay people off? No, it's not fun to do. There's a whole bunch of that. And so I offer that story to you as we call that guy Instructor Half Butt because his left butt cheek had been blown off by a rocket propelled grenade in Vietnam. But don't worry, he had a great sense of humor. He could tell us he could do more with his half butt than we could our full butts.
That does take a good sense of humor.
And he probably could actually, but so that was an early turning point. I mean, I was 22 years old when I was listening to that character, and the irony is we had to do this physical fitness test to do an official class up, and half the class, after they listened to that talk, didn't pass the test. So I've carried that story with me my entire life, and
Yeah.
every time I get into some hard point, I ask myself, okay, well, how much am I willing to sacrifice? That's what you mean. How much you willing to pay, right? How much you willing to give of yourself to try and do something else.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that story, so it was funny because I launched this podcast, right? Guts, Grit, and Great Business. And I thought, and I was aware of Angela Duckworth's book on grit.
Hmm.
I hadn't read it yet, but I have a lifelong relationship with that word. And so I picked it up and I read it the other day, but she talks about the amount of work that has gone into trying to figure out, for example, even like with your Navy SEAL batch of kids, right? Trying to get into become a Navy SEAL and other really elite programs like that. What it takes, and for a long time, people have tried to relate the the outcome, the likelihood of a successful outcome for somebody to their inherent, smarts or to their natural talent or to any variety of things that they feel like are somewhat measurable. And it turns out none of those things predicted the likelihood for success.
Mm.
It all boiled down to somebody's ability to endure. And it really so Angela came up with this whole quiz around grit and trying to determine how you measure somebody's grittiness. And which is why people that maybe they didn't even expect to be the ones standing at the end were the ones that were standing, and the ones that had natural talent and had kind of been in the front of the line their whole life because of the way they could show up and perform. But when the going really gets tough, this gets back to your sunny day story, right? What does it really take to get through? It may not be natural talent or smarts. It just takes making the decision that you're going to get through.
And the guts to try again.
Mm-hmm.
Failed again and again because they don't actually have that much time, even though that portion of training is 9 months and then you go through another couple of years. But the component of not just the guts, but remember when I brought up the term swim buddy?
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of us had a moment of weakness. Every single one of us had that question mark of maybe I'm just not good enough for this. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I chose the wrong door, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and that's where your swim buddy would be standing right there next to you, going, "Okay, I'm suffering too, but let's do this." And I can't stress enough, like the moment you get teamed up with a swim buddy, your chances of success go up astronomically. And so anybody who's sitting out there listening to this podcast and they're like, oh man, I'm having a tough time, this COVID, the quarantine, and you're looking at all the wonderful negatives that are out there because they're out, you just turn the news on and you got plenty of them. Don't forget, there's also the equal amount positive. And if you don't have a swim buddy, you can use this podcast as one, but go find somebody that can help you in those moments. Because I tell this story sometimes about when I was class leader in Hell Week, and one of my star teammates came to me and he said, "Sir, when I walk out of this bathroom, I'm going to go ring that bell." And I remember putting my arm around him and we looked at each other in the mirror and I said, "Look at us. I mean, we're a mess, right? It's been up for 3 days straight. I'm like, I'll take a deal with you because I feel just as bad as you do. How about we just wait to see the sunrise?" That would be we didn't know how much time that would be because you don't have watches or anything, but how about we just wait for the sunrise and then we talk about it? And that's all it took for him. And then what ended up happening, 8 months later, he's the honor man of the class. So we all can skid the bottom, right? The good thing about hitting that rock bottom, it's a great foundation to grow from.
I love that. Yeah, the importance of a swim buddy, I can't underscore that enough. Like having people that you can rely on in those tough times, even just to hear you out or say, "You've got this." I know that, in my personal, I mean, I've had several in life where they've been very, very dark days. Even just remembering a story or remembering something else that was shared from somebody who had been through something extraordinarily tough was enough to keep me hanging on for another, few minutes, just concentrating on my breath or just getting through, an excruciating amount of pain. And I just think the power of connection and the power of relying on strength shared by others is just crucial. So talk to me about rock bottom. You mentioned, rock bottom, hitting rock bottom actually being, a powerful thing. For folks that are listening right now, and I don't know, I mean, I'm sure that you've got multiple rock bottoms to share in your own journey, just given the size of your journey. But what do you say to people right now who are at rock bottom, who are really feeling compression or pinched by current circumstances?
Look up. Stop looking down, right? Be where your feet are. Understand that anybody who's been on any kind of a journey that's really worth something to talk about, rock bottom is a great storyline to start a new chapter. And yes, I've looked at bankruptcy 3 times, been within 30 days, all 3 times of saying, okay, I'm going to have to file. And each time there was just this attitude of, you know what, there's got to be a way. There's got to be just another way, one more day, right? We have this tendency of what I call the 3 whats. What was, what is, and what will be. And what was is helpful only from a reflection point of view of what did we learn. We can't go back to what was. No day you can go back to. Maybe perhaps that's why SEAL Team's motto is the only easy day was yesterday. Because it was yesterday. It's over. It's done, right? Pre-COVID, post-COVID, whatever kind of COVID, it's part of our history, right? We can learn and take the joy and have the memories of it, but we got to leave it there. What is the most crucial moment, because that's the moment that we can actually affect a change. We can make a decision. What will be is something we have to be very careful with, because we are built with a negativity bias. It's natural. It's there for our survival mechanism to make sure that we put a higher emphasis on negative than positive just to survive. Of course, we're way beyond the saber-toothed tiger days of 2 million years ago, or whatever the saber-tooth was around. Everyone seems to love the saber-tooth, but cave bear or whatever, right? But what will end up happening is if we really just start thinking, let's take this quarantine moment, like, oh, what's happening? I can't get my business to go. If I can't get my business to go and the shops don't open up and this doesn't happen, then we start creating these if-then negative hypotheticals, are what I call them. And these negative hypotheticals are crushing to our ego. They will put us in the deepest depths of despair, because we will be self-defeated before we ever even get to the starting line. A little bit like what Instructor Halfbutt was doing, right? He was kind of throwing it out there, giving it, and just enough to be like, oh, wait a second, I don't think I really want to be shot at. Like, I just want to be able to walk into the bar where the Navy SEALs tried to talk about. Like, no. What do you think we're doing here, right? So when you start thinking about rock bottom, the best thing to be thinking about is, okay, let's just keep looking up. Let's look at the next thing I can do to go one step higher. People would say, well, hey, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you build something? 1 hour, 1 day at a time. And, I'm jumping around here slightly. There's so much to talk about, but I enjoy climbing mountains. And every year, a couple of close friends will go climb a mountain together. And recently we climbed Denali up in Alaska. And Denali is a very interesting mountain because you can't see the summit until about 45 minutes you're there. And it took 13 days to get there to that point, right? And it was miserable. I mean, it sucked. I was carrying 65 pounds on my back, and I was towing 65 pounds, and I was definitely not as aerobically conditioned as the other fellas, and I was worried I was holding people back. But here's the thing. When you do those climbs, you can't think about the mountain. You got to think about the moment. And I use this phrase, focus on the moment, not the mountain. Focus on this moment. Okay, you're at rock bottom. Great, right? Let's play the opposite game. I can't go any lower without explosives, right? So let's now figure out a way to do one step, just one improvement. That's all I need. Give me one improvement for this day. One little improvement. And before you know it, if you focus just on that one thing each day, you'll find that that rock will turn into a springboard for you.
Oh, there's so much good stuff there to unpack. And I know this is a big conversation, but let me ask you this one question. Based on what you've been saying, do you think that having guts or grit, whatever part of the equation, do you think that's inherently tied to also being an optimistic person?
Never been asked that question before. So let's think about that for a moment. I would say that the guts and the grit are tied most closely to somebody understanding the outcomes of whatever it is they're after. And if they're willing to accept that outcome for whatever it is, then they will decide if they're going to have the guts or the grit. Let me give you an example. In both of my books, I talk about this thing called outcome accounts, where you define this goal. And I think, by the way, you don't have to be positive to define a goal. You can be a realist. You can be somewhat negative or skeptical, right? You define this goal, and then you write down one side. You say, okay, on the positive side, what happens if I make this goal? What's the outcome? Number two, who does it impact? And number three, how does it make me feel? And then you do exactly the same thing on the negative column at the same time. And if somebody, whether they're positive or negative, goes through and really decides about the consequences of achieving or not achieving said goal, that is going to motivate them to make a decision on, you know what, that's unacceptable to me. I might be negative, but it is unacceptable for me to raise children that aren't loving, that aren't going to be more productive for society. I may be negative, and maybe it's a negative world, but I'm going to do my very best to be the best parent I can. Or I'm going to set that example so that they can do this. And I'm going to go after that business. Even though I'm kind of a negative person, I'm doing it for my kids, right? So I think from that point of view, that's how I look at it. I obviously am an optimist.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm quite a positive person. However, I was not born with a positive gene. Like people say that all the time. Like, oh, Alden, it's easy for you to say that. It's just you're Captain Positive. And the fact of the matter is, no, I wasn't. I was in the process of getting kicked out of SEAL team because they figured out that I had been taking asthma medication, and they knew that you're not allowed to be an asthmatic. And I said, I'm not an asthmatic. I was doing that performance enhancement, which is kind of true. That helps you get more oxygen in your lungs, performance enhancement.
Yeah.
And so I had to say goodbye to the drugs, and I also had a decision to make. I had to say, like, okay, well, how do I want to handle this? And it became a really important turning point for me of like, you know what? I really want to make this. I'm going to will this thing one way or the other. And I'm only going to think of things that are going to be helpful for me to get through whatever this next thing is. So when it would be these long runs that I always suffered on, I would just focus on my breath and feel like, oh, I can feel it coming into my lungs, and my lungs are pushing it back out. And, you know, you visualize those things, and you just get I geek out on that. Now, did I still have some lung problems from time to time? Sure. Did I grow out of some of the asthma? Perhaps. I've been taking the medication for 10 years, but those were things where I became very intentional about being positive. and about practicing positivity, which, by the way, you have to do every single day. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just when you want to.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you're handed that seemingly negative outcome of something and say, well, actually, this is another opportunity to learn. Well, I can actually get better. This struggle will build strength for me. Cool. A lot of people would be like, this sucks. I can't believe this happened to me. This happened to me. I didn't deserve this, right? And then the pity party happens and they turn into a victim and then things shut down.
Yes. Well, and I love the reframe, because for me personally, when I witness people that have, we'll just call it high levels of guts or grit, usually what I see from the outside is somebody who is or seems to be a naturally optimistic person, meaning that even in the toughest of times, they're either looking for opportunities or they're looking for even the slightest change in circumstance that's going to help them move to the next level, versus somebody who is mired in the other side of the conversation, which you pointed out, which is the what if, right? The kind of the downward spiral of the what if scenarios that are usually leaning into our negative bias,
Right.
right?
And, yeah.
But I,
Go
But
ahead.
really quick, I was just going to say, I love the reframe of calling it, instead of maybe calling it being, naturally optimistic or deciding optimism is the path, really practicing positivity, because that feels more empowering for somebody to be able to choose that and say, I'm going to practice positivity, rather than be stuck in the conversation of like, well, maybe I wasn't born with optimism, or I am not naturally an optimistic person. Anyways, I just wanted to point that out. I think it's a really good reframe.
I I wholeheartedly agree, Heather. And the more people start to understand, there's very few things we can control. However, we can control how we think. There are lots of people who want to influence how we think, but it's really deciding up to us if we accept their influence or not.
Mm-hmm.
We can decide how we feel. And people are going, how can you do that? If you stand tall and smile, it's really hard to feel sad,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then we can control our actions, assuming you're lucky enough to use your arms and legs and make that actual decision occur of movement, which not all of us can do. Even if we just have our heart in our head, it's still an amazing amount of things that we can make an impact on.
Mm-hmm.
But we have this tendency to get trapped in all the noise out there. And all that noise floods our system, overwhelms us, and our negativity kicks in because it's our survival mode. Now we just have to survive. And then we end up creating these false pretenses of negative hypotheticals that just send us down this slippery slope of misery.
Yes, it's I think calling it a practice, I love that part of this conversation, calling anything a practice, whether it's dealing with mindset, dealing with just a million decisions that we get to make on a daily basis, especially in the midst of tough times. I think I recall back to a time when I was pregnant with my daughter. I had this period of time where I'd gotten sick. The doctors didn't yet know that I was having some reflux, like really severe esophageal reflux due to pregnancy, and I think some other conditions that happened before pregnancy. But what it meant is I had this recurrent cough during pregnancy, and what they didn't know is I was aspirating all this stomach acid into my lungs. And so then I'd get pneumonia. So I had 3 rounds of back-to-back pneumonia during my daughter's pregnancy. And I was coughing so hard I broke ribs, and then I fell down the stairs and broke another rib, and it was this never-ending battle. I just felt like I was in the battle for my life of just trying to breathe, just trying to figure out what was going on up here. It took a lot of work, but the one thing I would tell myself literally minute to minute, there was about a month at the end of her pregnancy where I couldn't sleep, like even for 5 minutes at night. I just had to stand in the shower or by a humidifier to try to keep my airways open. It was really, really intense. And I remember the one phrase I hung on to is it's not always going to be this way. It's not always going to be this way. Even though I didn't know what was next, right? The power of that one phrase of just saying, it's not always going to be this way. May not be this way in 5 minutes. May not be this way in 10 minutes. I don't know, but it's not always going to be this way. And for
I
me,
love that. I totally agree with that. I love that. It's not always going to be this way.
yeah, and I just know the nature of life is that even in the hardest moments, even if we don't know what comes next or how we're going to get there, even if we can't really move ourselves into the super positive side of the equation or the conversation, I think just opening up to the unknown and just saying, one thing I do know is it's not always going to be this way, allows us that sliver of hope that things will shift. And I hear that even in, what you're talking about in some of your stories and looking up and really practicing being in the moment, right? We can't change what happened yesterday. We have no idea what's coming in our tomorrow. And just really being in the moment is the only thing that we can do. So
I
what,
love it. Thank
what
you for sharing that.
well, yeah, your message hits home in a big way, and I want people to really understand, the power of our minds, the power of even being able to open up to a little hope or positivity as a way to shift even just how we move through something, regardless of whether we get to control any of the circumstances or not.
Yeah, you just made me think of it. It really is kind of a continuum, right? If you're on one side of that number line of a continuum of I am negative, the world sucks, I'm miserable, and I am going to be miserable. Like, okay, well, are you? Is everything like that? Well, no, not all the time. Like, it's just a little step, right? And then when you get to
Mhm.
that little step, then you're like, hey, you know what? I can actually affect a little bit more change. You don't have to be Captain Cheerleader positive over here. And, and I think some people will be like, oh, I hate the person that says every day is a glorious day and blah, blah, blah. And, they can be a little more real. It doesn't sound,
Yeah.
I get that. But it is a continuum, right?
Mhm.
Don't focus on the mountain of moving from one side of the continuum to the other. Just take
Mhm.
the first step.
Totally, totally. And that feels a lot more empowering to me because the reality is if you are in a really, really hard place, it can be hard to hear from somebody who's all rah, rah, rah,
Oh yeah,
I mean,
piss them off. Oh,
totally.
and they'll shut them down, and then the amygdala's fired, and they're like, I don't want to deal with that person.
Yeah, yeah, but staying out of the black and white thinking, staying out of, the far end of, what really can lead to hopelessness. I think just opening up to one step, one step, one step is really what can create dramatic change, and it doesn't have to be a huge thing. Um, so,
By the way, that's how to get out of that rock, right? It's
yeah,
one step, one climb, just one little notch at a time to get out
yes.
from the bottom of rock bottom.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Well, Alden, anything else that you want to share with us today about thriving in uncertain times?
I really would like everybody to remember that there is this law of nature out there that says for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.
Mm,
For every amount of uncertainty we face, there is always an equal amount of opportunity. It may not be served in the same form you're used to during times of certainty, but I promise you it is there, and it's there for everybody to take. They just have to shift their thoughts, open their minds, and look for it.
what is a question or a statement for people that are in that place of, of hardship and risk and unease? What's a question that they can ask themselves to shift into even being able to see something as an opportunity? Like if they are not naturally doing it themselves already, how do they get there? I guess that's a more appropriate way to ask that question.
So there's a few questions that I'll ask myself.
Mm-hmm.
What am I pretending to know that I don't really know? That's one. Number two, what is a belief that I currently hold that if it shifted from a negative to a positive would change my direction?
Mm.
Now that's some work there, but we all have a belief system,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to get into those beliefs, identify belief that is holding you back is a critical component to deal with right now. Maybe your belief is, my business is done because I can't open my storefront. Okay, well, what if we told you it wasn't done, that you can still do business, but you have to look at your storefront in a different way? Oh, okay, I never thought of that, right? Unfortunately, a lot of times what happens is frustration immediately leads us to anger, and then anger triggers that little walnut-sized piece of our brain called the amygdala, and then we get in the fight or flight, and we're not thinking creatively. And we need you
Mm-hmm.
to stay thinking creatively. And so another one might be, if I knew I could succeed right now, what would I be doing? What could I
Mm.
be?
Mm-hmm. I love that.
So those are three.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the importance of recognizing our beliefs is just huge. How many times do we have a belief that this shouldn't be happening, right? This whole like, why is this happening to me? This shouldn't be happening. It's bad. Also labeling it, right? This is harmful or bad or causing pain in some way. And I think asking, what if this is the thing that is going to get me to the next level? What would that look like? Or what if this thing that is happening right now that is causing so much pain in 2 years turns out to be a great thing? Like, again, opening up to not knowing, and which is why I love your question is, if I knew I could succeed right now, what would I be doing? It's a little bit of twist on that. Like, what if this thing was actually serving me? If I was using this to succeed, what would I be doing?
Right.
Awesome. I think you've got a gift for us, right? You have a gift for our listeners today. Do you want to talk to us a minute about that?
A gift for the listeners?
Yeah, do you have a lesson to thrive in uncertain times?
Ah, yes, yes, I do have that lesson to thrive in uncertain things.
I love it. And just
So,
just so people know where they can find it, if you go to the show notes at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast, you'll get a link to Alden's gift.
check it out. It will help you with the 6 essential actions of thriving during a quarantine.
Ooh, yeah. Well, we all have lots of opportunities, like you and I were talking about right now before the podcast started. Lots of opportunities to up-level our skills in pretty much every department of life currently. I'm going to go check that out myself as a mom to two little people and trying to run a business at the same time. I feel like I'm in a massive period of compression, and that things I used to be able to do in 8 or 10 hours a day need to happen in like 2.
And you know what? You're doing it with a smile on your face. You're doing just fine, Heather.
Well, thank you. Alden, so great to have you today. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more or hear more about how you help people with mindset, with business, the range of your work?
Please come to my website, which is alden-mills.com, and they can see my blog posts, my Instagram feed, Facebook feed. I'm generating new content all the time and always happy to help.
I love that. And what are the ways, really quick before we sign off, what are the ways that you work with your clients?
I am a coach
Mm-hmm.
and a speaker, and most of the coaching is either one-on-one with executives or in small executive teams. And then I also come in to do keynote speaking and seminars specifically around leading yourself, leading others, and going through my Unstoppable Mindset workshop.
I love that. So if you're listening and you're building a business, you're leading a team, and any of Alden's advice or stories have resonated with you today, reach out and connect with him. Alden, such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, and keep inspiring with the
Thank
guts
you.
and the grit.
We got to hear the stories. We got to hear how other people have
Do.
made it
I
through.
love it.
Yes. Such a pleasure to connect. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye bye.